The screen in front of me is a window into their world, a world they think I've already left. It's a small, private dining room at a restaurant so exclusive it doesn't even have a sign. Just a discreetly lit number on a brick facade in Boston's Back Bay. They chose it for the privacy. Of course, the irony makes a bitter smile touch my lips. There is no privacy, not from me. On the screen, Ava is radiant. She's wearing a dark emerald dress. The one I bought her for our last anniversary. It brings out the green in her eyes that used to look at me with what I thought was love. Now, they are fixed on Julian, sparkling with a different kind of fire. A triumphant one. Julian sits across from her, his hand covering hers on the white tablecloth. He looks distinguished, confident, the respected chemist from MIT, my best friend. He leans in and whispers something in her ear, and her laughter is a silent movie playing out before me. I can't hear it, but I remember the sound. It used to be my favorite music. A sommelier approaches her table, holding a bottle of champagne with theatrical reverence. It's a 1998 Dom Perignon, an excellent year. I should know. I ordered it. He presents the bottle, and I see Julian nod, a smug, satisfied little gesture. He reads a small card attached to the neck of the bottle. From a secret admirer, celebrating your bright future. He smirks at Ava, as if they share a private joke with the universe. They do. The joke is me. They believe I'm at home, wasting away in our bed, too weak to even lift my head. They think my body is finally succumbing to the mysterious illness that has baffled Boston's best doctors for months. They think they've won. They are toasting to my impending death and their new life together, funded by my life insurance. The sommelier pops the cork with a practiced flourish. He pours the golden, bubbling liquid into two crystal flutes. They lift their glasses, their eyes meet. A silent promise passes between them. A future built on a foundation of my bones. They drink. And as I watch them bring the glasses to their lips, my own hand is steady, my heart is calm. The man they think is dying is more alive than he has been in a year. The architect in me appreciates the symmetry of it all. They built my prison, and now they will be buried in it. I am not just watching their downfall. I am the architect of it. 6 months earlier, the first sign that something was wrong was a light. I was standing in the atrium of the new library we were designing downtown. A space I conceptualized to feel like a cathedral of knowledge. Shafts of late autumn sunlight cut through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. For a split second, the light fractured. It splintered into 1,000 sharp, painful shards, and the world tilted violently. I gripped the edge of a drafting table to steady myself, my knuckles white. The dizziness passed as quickly as it came, leaving a dull throb behind my eyes. Liam, you okay? Mark, my junior partner, looked at me with concern. Fine, I said, forcing a smile. Just stood up too fast, must be getting old. But I wasn't old, I was 38. I was at the peak of my career, my health, my life. I ran 3 times a week along the Charles River, ate well, and slept soundly beside the woman I adored. The incident in the atrium was a fluke, I told myself. A brain fart, nothing more. Life at home was, for all intents and purposes, perfect. Our house in Wellesley was my design. A modern structure of glass and cedar that still felt warm and inviting. It was Ava who made it a home. She had a curator's eye for beauty, and a warmth that filled every room. She left her job at a contemporary art gallery a few years after we married, saying she wanted to focus on us, on creating a sanctuary, and she had. Our life was a carefully curated masterpiece of quiet success and domestic bliss. You look pale, she said that evening, her cool hand on my forehead. We were in the kitchen, the scent of garlic and rosemary filling the air. Are you sure you're not overdoing it with the library project? I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a long day. I wrapped my arms around her from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder. Nothing that your cooking can't fix. She leaned back into me, and for that moment, everything felt right. The world was stable. The light was whole, and I was safe in our sanctuary. Julian came for dinner the following weekend, a regular Saturday night ritual. He'd been my friend since college, and when Ava and I started dating, he seamlessly became our friend. He was brilliant, a celebrated research chemist at MIT, and he had a way of explaining complex ideas that made you feel smarter just for listening. So the latest is a synthetic peptide that can mimic the function of a faulty enzyme, he explained, swirling the red wine in his glass. In layman's terms, we're hijacking the body's own messaging system. The potential for targeted therapies is staggering. That's incredible, Julian, Ava said, her eyes wide with admiration. You're literally changing the world. We try, he said with a self-deprecating smile, but his eyes gleamed with pride. I felt a genuine warmth for him. He was family. He was a brilliant, eccentric brother I never had. We talked late into the night, about his research, my buildings, and the comfortable, predictable rhythm of our lives. I never once noticed the way his gaze lingered on Ava a second too long. Or the subtle way she angled her body towards him as she laughed. Why would I? I had no reason to. The dizzy spells became more frequent. They were joined by a fatigue so profound it felt like I was walking through water. I'd be in a client meeting, my mind sharp one moment, and then a thick fog would roll in, stealing my words, blurring my thoughts. I started losing weight. My suits, once perfectly tailored, began to hang off my frame. Ava's concern grew more pronounced. Liam, this isn't right. I'm making a doctor's appointment for you, no arguments. She was so efficient, so caring, she found me the best internist in Boston. Dr. Chen at Mass General. She drove me to the appointment, held my hand in the waiting room, and took meticulous notes as the doctor spoke. Dr. Chen was thorough. She ordered a battery of tests, blood panels, an MRI of my brain, a CT scan of my abdomen. I became a human pincushion, a collection of data points, and every single test came back normal, frustratingly, impossibly normal. Your blood work is perfect, Mr. Hayes, Dr. Chen said. Her brow furrowed as she looked over my chart. Your vitamin levels are optimal. There's no sign of inflammation, no markers for any common autoimmune diseases. Your brain scan is clean. Structurally, you appear to be in excellent health. Then why do I feel like I'm dying? The words came out harsher than I intended. Dr. Chen gave me a sympathetic look. The body is a complex system. Sometimes we see chronic fatigue syndromes or idiopathic conditions that don't show up on standard tests. It could be viral in origin, something that your body fought off but left you depleted. She prescribed rest, a better diet, which I already had, stress management. It was a non-diagnosis. A medical shoulder shrug. I left the hospital feeling more lost than before. Ava was my rock. She researched rare conditions online. She started making me health-boosting smoothies every morning, filled with kale and spirulina and things that tasted like dirt, but were supposedly good for me. We'll beat this, my love, she'd say, kissing my forehead. Whatever it is, we'll fight it together. Julian was a source of intellectual support. He'd bring over articles from obscure medical journals. I was reading about mitochondrial disorders, he'd say, his expression serious and thoughtful. The symptoms can be vague and often misdiagnosed. It's a long shot, Liam, but maybe worth mentioning to Dr. Chen. He was so helpful, so concerned. He and Ava would have quiet, serious conversations in the kitchen while I rested on the sofa, their hushed tones a comforting murmur in the background. They were my support system, my team. The weeks turned into a month, then two. The fog in my brain thickened, my work suffered. I had to hand over the library project to Mark, a decision that felt like admitting defeat. My world, once expansive and full of light, had shrunk to the four walls of our beautiful house. Most days, I didn't have the energy to leave my bed. I was a ghost in my own life, watching it happen from a great, hazy distance. I catch my reflection in the mirror and barely recognize the man staring back. His eyes were sunken, his skin had a grayish pallor, and the bones of his face were sharp and prominent. This couldn't be me. I was Liam Hayes. I built things, I designed spaces that would outlive me. I wasn't this fragile, hollowed-out creature. One afternoon, I was shuffling to the kitchen for a glass of water when I heard them talking. Ava and Julian, their voices were low, but I caught a few words through the partially closed door. Patience is key, Julian was saying. It has to look natural, no one can suspect a thing. I know, Ava replied, her voice tight with something I couldn't place. But it's hard, seeing him like this every day. It's harder for us, my love, Julian said, his voice dropping even lower, becoming a caress. But think of the end goal. Think of our future. I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm in my chest. I must have misheard. They were talking about my illness. They were frustrated with the lack of progress, just like I was. Julian was encouraging her to be patient with the slow, mysterious nature of my disease, of course. That was it. He was being a good friend, a supportive friend. The thought that it could be anything else was absurd. It was a sickness making me paranoid, making my mind twist their kindness into something ugly. I pushed the thought away, ashamed of my own suspicion. They were my wife and my best friend. They loved me. But the shame didn't last. Suspicion, once planted, is a hardy weed. It grows in the dark. It chokes out the things you thought were beautiful. I started to watch them. Not openly, but from behind the veil of my sickness. My mind, though foggy, was still an architect's mind. I was trained to see patterns, to notice misalignments, to understand how a structure holds together, and the structure of my life, I was beginning to realize, had a fatal flaw. Ava's care, which had once been my greatest comfort, began to feel like a performance. Her gestures were perfect, her words of love and encouragement flawless. But her eyes were always somewhere else. They'd skim my face not for signs of recovery, but for confirmation of my decline. When she thought I was asleep, I'd sometimes see her on her phone, a small, tight smile on her face as she texted, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in a very long time. Julian's visits became more frequent. He'd sit by my bed, talking about his work, about the news, about anything to fill the quiet, sick room air. He was a master of feigned sympathy. "It's a damn shame, Liam," he'd say, shaking his head. "A mind like yours, trapped. We just need to figure this out." He started bringing little things. A new type of herbal tea that was supposed to boost cellular energy, a small, expensive air purifier, gifts from a concerned friend. Or were they props? Part of the stage they were setting for my final act. The morning coffee became the centerpiece of my quiet obsession. Every single morning, without fail, Ava would bring me a mug of black coffee. "Here, my love. This will help you wake up." It was a ritual, our ritual, but it had changed. I used to be the one who made the coffee, grinding the beans, enjoying the aroma that filled our kitchen. But since I'd gotten sick, she had taken over the task completely. If I ever suggested getting it myself, she would insist, "No, no, you rest. Let me take care of you." I started to dread the sight of that mug. It was a simple ceramic mug, a deep blue, a gift from a trip we'd taken to Cape Cod years ago. It used to represent happy memories. Now, it felt like a weapon aimed at my head. I'd drink it, my throat tight, trying to detect any unusual taste, any strange texture. But there was nothing, it was just coffee. Strong, black coffee. And with every sip, I felt a little weaker, the fog a little thicker. Was I imagining it? Was I going crazy? Was the illness attacking my mind, turning me paranoid, making me see betrayal where there was only love and concern? The doubt was a physical torment, almost as debilitating as a fatigue. I was caught in a horrible limbo. If I was wrong, I was betraying the two people who were trying to save me. If I was right, I was being murdered by them. The moment of sickening clarity came on a Tuesday. It was a gray, drizzly morning. The light outside was flat and unforgiving. Ava brought in the coffee as usual, placing it on my bedside table with her practiced, gentle smile. I was feeling particularly weak, my limbs heavy and uncooperative. I pushed myself up, my hand trembling slightly as I reached for the mug. My fingers fumbled. A sudden spasm of weakness shot through my arm, and the mug slipped. It didn't shatter. It tipped, falling onto its side, and the hot, dark liquid spilled across the white surface of the nightstand. And I saw it. For a fraction of a second before Ava could lunge forward with the cloth, I saw it. Against the stark white laminate, the spilled coffee shimmered with an unnatural, rainbow-like film. An oily sheen that broke the light for just an instant before it vanished. It wasn't cream. It wasn't sugar. It was something else, something that didn't belong. "Oh, honey, you poor thing, you're so weak, let me get that." Ava's voice was a flurry of concern, but her movements were frantic. She wasn't looking at me. Her entire focus was on the spill. She wiped it up with a desperate speed, her hand darting back and forth, smearing the last traces of the telltale sheen into nothingness. "What was that?" I asked, my voice a dry whisper. My heart was a block of ice in my chest. There was something in it. She didn't meet my eyes. She just kept wiping the already clean surface. "What are you talking about, Liam? It was just coffee. You're not thinking clearly. Let me get you some water." She bustled out of the room, taking the mug and the cloth with her, leaving me staring at the clean, white nightstand. But I had seen it, I knew I had. It was a small detail, a fleeting observation. But my architect's mind seized it, the hushed conversations. Julian, the chemist, talking about hijacking the body's systems. Ava's insistence on making the coffee, my inexplicable, untraceable decline, the oily sheen. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered and confusing, suddenly snapped into place, forming a picture so monstrous I could barely breathe. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were ensuring it, patiently, methodically, making it look like a tragedy, like the slow, sad fading of a brilliant man. The natural death that Julian had spoken of. In that moment, the fog in my brain vanished. It was burned away by a white-hot rage that was colder and clearer than anything I had felt in months. The weakness in my limbs was forgotten. The despair that had been my constant companion evaporated. I was no longer a patient. I was no longer a victim. I was a problem to be solved, an equation to be balanced. That night, I waited until I heard the soft, even rhythm of Ava's breathing beside me. She slept the peaceful, untroubled sleep of someone with a clear conscience. Or perhaps someone with no conscience at all. I slipped out of bed, my movements silent, deliberate. I went to my office, the room where I had designed buildings of glass and steel. Spaces of logic and reason. I sat in the dark, the glow of the monitor illuminating my face. My hands were perfectly steady as I typed. Discrete indoor security cameras, smallest available, audio recording, long battery life. I scrolled through the results, my mind working with a precision I thought I had lost forever. I wasn't just looking for a camera, I was looking for a witness, an impartial, electronic eye that would see what I now knew to be true. I found a model that was no bigger than a shirt button. I ordered 3. One for the kitchen, aimed directly at the coffee maker, one for the living room, where they had their quiet, serious talks, and one for our bedroom. The thought of it made bile rise in my throat, but I needed to know the full scope of their betrayal. I paid with a credit card Ava didn't know about, and I had them shipped to a private mailbox I'd set up at a UPS store that afternoon. Using what little energy I had, it was my first move. The first step in dismantling the beautiful, perfect life they were trying to steal from me. They thought they were in control. They thought their plan was flawless. But they had underestimated me. They had forgotten who I was. I don't just design buildings, I understand them. I know how to find the load-bearing walls, the structural weaknesses. And I was about to bring their entire world crashing down around them. The war had begun, and I would be the one to finish it. The package arrived 2 days later. A plain brown box waiting in the sterile metal locker of the UPS store. Lifting it felt like hoisting a block of granite. The walk back to my car, a mere 50 yards, left me breathless and sweating. I had to lean against the door for a full minute, performing for any imagined audience the role of a man whose body was failing him. The truth was, a different kind of energy was thrumming through my veins. It was the electrifying hum of purpose. Getting the cameras in place was a logistical nightmare that required the full focus power of my architect's mind. I had to map out Ava's schedule, her patterns, the dead zones in her attention. She had a yoga class on Wednesday mornings and a standing lunch with a friend on Fridays. These were my windows, my opportunities. The first was the kitchen. On Wednesday, as soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I went to work. My body still felt sluggish, a traitorous vessel, but my mind was a laser. I had chosen a spot on the underside of the upper cabinet, directly above the coffee maker. The camera, no bigger than my thumbnail, had an adhesive back. My hands trembled, not from weakness this time, but from adrenaline. I had to get on a step stool, an act that felt like scaling a mountain. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside the window, sounded like her car returning. I fixed it in place, its tiny, black lens a single, unblinking eye aimed at the heart of their conspiracy. The living room camera was easier. I tucked it into the dense foliage of a large fiddle-leaf fig plant that sat in the corner. A gift from Julian. The irony was so thick I could taste it. It had a perfect view of the sofa where they often sat, their heads close together in whispered conversation. The bedroom was the hardest, not physically, but emotionally. To bud the room where I had shared my life, my body, my most vulnerable self with Ava felt like a desecration, a violation of a memory that was already dead. But I had to know. I had to understand the full depth of the abyss I was in. I placed a final camera on the high shelf of our walk-in closet. Nestled between a stack of old photo albums, it had a clear view of the bed, my stage. I finished with minutes to spare, collapsing onto the sofa just as I heard the garage door rumble open. When Ava walked in, flushed and serene from her yoga class, she found me exactly where she expected me to be, a pale, exhausted man, seemingly too weak to have moved all morning. "How are you feeling, my love?" she asked, her voice like cool water. "Tired," I rasped, letting my eyes flutter shut, just so tired. From that day on, my life became a performance. I was an actor in a one-man play, and my audience was my own would-be assassins. I had to be convincingly weak, frustratingly sick. But behind the mask of frailty, I was a scientist gathering data. The morning coffee ritual transformed into a high-stakes game of sleight of hand. Ava would bring the mug, her smile unwavering. I would thank her, my voice a pathetic croak. I'd lift them up to my lips with a trembling hand, pretending to take a sip, then I would stage a distraction. A sudden, racking cough was my most reliable tool. "Liam," she'd cry, a perfect note of alarm in her voice. I would wave her away, stumbling toward the master bathroom. "I'm okay, just need a second." I'd lock the door, turn on the faucet to mask the sound, and pour the contents of the mug down the sink. I'd watch the dark liquid swirl away, my reflection in the mirror a ghostly stranger. Then I'd flush the toilet for good measure, splash some water on my face, and emerge, looking even more drained than before. "I'm sorry," I'd say, leaning heavily on the doorframe. I can't seem to keep anything down." The flicker of disappointment in her eyes was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. It was there for a fraction of a second before being replaced by a mask of loving concern. "Oh, my poor darling. Don't you worry, just rest." Every time I successfully disposed of the poison, it was a small, silent victory. And with each passing day, as my body processed only water and the plain toast I'd managed to eat later, I felt a sliver of my old strength returning. The fog in my brain began to recede, not completely, but enough for the cogs of my mind to turn with lethal precision. After a week of the charade, I knew it was time. I waited until 2 in the morning, a time when the house was steeped in a silence so deep it felt absolute. Ava was asleep beside me, her breathing a soft, steady rhythm. I slipped out of bed, a wraith in the moonlight filtering through our large bedroom window. In my office, I didn't turn on a light. The glow of the laptop screen was enough. I slid the first memory card, the one from the kitchen, into the reader. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was the moment of truth. The point where suspicion would either crystallize into fact or shatter into paranoid delusion. The video file opened. The first few hours were a time-lapse ballet of morning light moving across the granite countertops. Then, at 7:15 a.m., she entered the frame. Ava, my Ava. She moved with a familiar grace, opening the cupboard, taking down the blue ceramic mug. She prepared the coffee maker, her movements efficient and routine. For a moment, my heart ached. This was a woman I loved starting her day. Then Julian walked in. He wasn't supposed to be there. He'd never come over so early. He was wearing his running gear, his face slick with sweat. He didn't knock. He used a key. He walked straight to her, and she turned into his arms as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He kissed her. Not a friendly peck on the cheek. It was a deep, possessive kiss, and she melted into him, her hands clutching the back of his shirt. I felt the air leave my lungs in a silent gasp. The visual confirmation of the affair was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me winded. I watched, frozen, as they broke apart. "Is he awake?" Julian murmured, his voice a low rumble captured perfectly by the tiny microphone. "No. He'll be out for at least another hour," Ava replied. "He was so weak yesterday." Julian nodded, his face hardening into a clinical mask. He reached into the small pocket of his running shorts and pulled out a tiny glass vial. It was no bigger than his pinky finger, filled with a clear, viscous liquid. He unscrewed the cap with an expert twist. "Just a few more weeks, maybe a month," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Dr. Chen is already talking about referring him to palliative care. It's working perfectly. The slow degradation of the system, no single point of failure. It will be a tragedy." He handed the vial to Ava. Her hand was steady. There was no hesitation, no flicker of doubt. She took the vial, tipped it over the blue mug, and let 3 drops of the clear liquid fall into the black coffee. She swirled the mug once, watching as the oily substance dissolved, leaving no trace. "To our future," she whispered, looking at Julian. "To us," he replied, and he kissed her again, his hand moving to the small of her back. I stopped the video. I sat there in the dark, the image of them kissing burned onto the back of my eyelids. The rage I expected to feel didn't come. The heartbreak I should have felt was absent. There was nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness, a void. The man they were killing, the man who had loved Ava, the man who had trusted Julian, was truly dead. He had died in the last 30 seconds, sitting in a leather chair in a dark room. Something new was taking his place. My mind, free from the shackles of love and doubt, began to work. It was no longer a matter of survival. It was a matter of design. They had their blueprint, a meticulous plan for my death. Now, I would draw up mine. It would be a mirror image of their own, reflecting their cruelty back at them with perfect, devastating symmetry. I would use their methods, their tools, their own calculated patience. They wanted my death to be a work of art, a natural tragedy. Fine, I would give them a masterpiece. I calmly ejected the memory card. My hands were no longer shaking. My breathing was even. I had my proof, I had my purpose. I was no longer the patient. I was a chemist now. The days that followed were a masterclass in deception. My performance as a dying man grew more refined, more tragically convincing. I allowed my beard to grow, the untrimmed gray hairs adding years to my face. I practiced the shallow, labored breath. I would let my hand tremble when I reached for a glass of water. Ava and Julian, my captive audience, seemed to believe every moment of it. Their confidence swelled with each passing day, making them careless. They were so close to the finish line, they couldn't see the trap being laid right at their feet. My secret life began the moment Ava left the house. The second her car was gone, the sick man would vanish. I'd rise from my bed, the sham of weakness falling away like a shed skin. My first order of business was rebuilding my strength. The toast and water diet was a start, but it wasn't enough. I began a new regimen. I'd make protein shakes, packed with vitamins and nutrients. Using a small blender I kept hidden in my office closet, I would drink them quickly, then meticulously wash every component and hide them away again before she returned. It was a race against the clock, a small act of rebellion that sent life coursing back into my depleted muscles. Slowly, painstakingly, the man in the mirror began to look less like a ghost and more like a predator in waiting. While my body healed, my mind was at war. I downloaded the video files from the other cameras. The living room footage showed them curled up on the sofa, whispering about their future. They planned vacations they would take with my money. They debated selling the house I had designed. They spoke of my impending death as if it were an inconvenient but necessary business transaction. The bedroom camera was the worst. It captured a level of intimacy and betrayal that felt like acid being poured on an open wound. I forced myself to watch it all. I needed the pain. I needed the anger to be pure, untainted by any lingering sentimentality. I had to burn away every last good memory of Ava to do what had to be done. I saved a single, damning clip from the kitchen footage, one showing Julian handing Ava the vial and her dropping the poison into my coffee. I encrypted the file and uploaded it to multiple cloud storage accounts under different aliases. It was my insurance policy, my legacy, should my own plan fail. The next phase required me to become a student of my enemy. I began to research Julian. Not the public Julian, the celebrated chemist, but the digital ghost he left behind. I pieced together his life from social media breadcrumbs, university publications, and forum posts. He was a man driven by a ravenous ego, overshadowed by a more famous father who was also a scientist. He was brilliant, but he was also deeply insecure, and he was in debt. Significant debt from a series of bad investments in biotech startups. It wasn't just about passion for Ava, it was about my money. My 7-figure life insurance policy was his get-out-of-jail-free card. He wasn't just stealing my wife, he was cashing me out. His arrogance was his greatest weakness. He gave lectures at the university, many of which were recorded and available online. I watched them for hours, not to understand the science, but to understand the man. I studied his gestures, his speech patterns, the way he presented complex information. I learned about his specialty, complex metal-based compounds, poisons that were notoriously difficult to detect in standard toxicological screens. They mimicked the symptoms of mitochondrial disease, causing a slow, systemic breakdown. A natural-looking death. It was his signature. The key to my counter-offensive lay in his lab coat. In the videos, whenever he came to the house, he would hang his coat on the hook by the back door, a creature of habit. Inside that coat, I knew, was my death sentence. I needed to get my hands on it. I orchestrated my opportunity with the precision of a military strategist. I knew Julian was scheduled to give a keynote address at a symposium on a Friday afternoon. He would come to the house for lunch with Ava beforehand, then leave straight for the event. That Friday, I put on my best performance yet. I was weaker than ever. I barely spoke, my breaths coming in shallow, ragged gasps. During their lunch, I staged a fainting spell. A moment of dramatic weakness that had Ava rushing to my side. Her face a perfect portrait of concern. "I'm all right," I whispered, letting my head loll back on the pillow. "Just very tired. I think I will sleep now." It worked perfectly. They left me for dead, their minds already on Julian's upcoming triumph at the symposium. I heard them talking in the hallway. "He seemed worse today," Ava said, her voice hushed. "The final stages," Julian replied, his tone clinical and detached. "It won't be long now. Don't worry. I'll see you tonight." I heard the back door close. I waited. I counted to 500, every number a lead weight. Then I got up. I walked to the back door. And there it was, his lab coat, hanging on the hook. It was a standard white coat, smelling faintly of ozone and chemicals. My hand dove into the side pocket. My fingers closed around a small, cool glass vial. It was identical to the one in the video, filled with the same clear, viscous liquid. I looked at the 3 drops worth of fluid left inside. My daily dose. I had come prepared. In my pocket was another identical vial, one I had purchased online from a medical supply company. This one was filled with a harmless sterile saline solution. My movements were swift and sure. I uncapped both vials. I used an eyedropper to carefully transfer the remaining poison from Julian's vial into a separate, secure container I'd brought for this purpose. I now possessed the very weapon they were using against me. Then, I refilled his vial with the saline solution, making sure the volume looked identical. I screwed the cap back on, wiped it clean of fingerprints, and slipped it back into the pocket of his lab coat. The entire exchange took less than 30 seconds. I had done it. I had disarmed him from this day forward. Ava would be dutifully dropping 3 drops of salt water into my morning coffee. They would be going through the motions of a murder, completely unaware that their weapon was now firing blanks. The final piece of my plan was confirmation. I needed to know exactly what the poison was. That evening, after my miraculous recovery from my fainting spell, I told Ava I wanted to try a new experimental clinic. It was a lie, of course, but a believable one. The next day, feigning a trip to this fictional clinic, I drove to a private lab on the other side of the city. I handed over a sample of my own blood, drawn by a phlebotomist at a small private service I paid for in cash. I also submitted the sample of the poison I had taken from Julian's vial. "I need a full toxicological workup," I told the lab technician, a stern-looking woman with no time for small talk. "Check for heavy metals, complex organic compounds, Anything that wouldn't show up on a standard hospital panel, anonymously. And I need it rushed. I paid a hefty fee for the rush order and the guarantee of discretion. As I walked out of the lab, I felt a strange sense of calm. The game had changed. I was no longer a pawn, reacting to their moves. I was an active player. I had the poison. I had the proof. And I had the perfect cover. A dying man whom no one would ever suspect. Now, all I had to do was wait for the results, let the harmless Celine do its work, and watch them celebrate their victory, blind to the fact that the chessboard had been flipped. Their checkmate was about to become my opening move. The placebo effect is a well-documented phenomenon. My case was a reverse. I was living through the nocebo effect's undoing. For months, my body had been told it was being poisoned and it had obeyed. Now, the message had changed. The daily ritual of the coffee continued. But the drops Ava added were now nothing more than salted water. And with each passing morning that I poured the harmless concoction down the drain and replaced it with my own hidden nourishment, I felt life returning to me in a steady, undeniable tide. It began subtly. The profound, bone-deep fatigue started to lift. Replaced by a manageable tiredness, the fog in my brain thinned, like mist burning off in the morning sun. My thoughts, once slow and syrupy, began to move with their old speed and clarity. I could hold a train of thought. I could read a chapter of a book. I could follow the plot of a movie. These small victories felt monumental. My performance, however, had to remain flawless. In fact, as I felt stronger, my acting had to become even more convincing. I had to remember to stoop my shoulders, to let a tremor enter my hand when I reached for something. I had to mimic the confusion and memory lapses that were no longer plaguing me. It was exhausting in its own way, this constant vigilance, this bifurcation of my existence into the dying man they saw, and the avenger I was becoming. Ava and Julian noticed nothing. Why would they? They saw what they wanted to see. They were the architects of this illness, and its progression was following their blueprint perfectly. My apparent stability was, in their minds, the plateau before the final, inevitable decline. His color is a little better today, I heard Ava say to Julian on the phone one afternoon. From my post on the sofa, feigning sleep. It's the calm before the storm, Julian's voice replied, tinny and distant through the phone. The body is trying to compensate, to find equilibrium. It's a classic sign. The final systems are about to fail. We just need to be patient. Patience, he kept repeating that word like a mantra. He had no idea. My patience was forged in the fires of betrayal. His was merely the impatience of a greedy man waiting for a check to clear. A week after I submitted the samples, the email I was waiting for arrived. It was from the private lab. A simple notification with a password-protected PDF attachment. I opened it in my office, the door locked, the curtains drawn. The report was dense, filled with chemical formulas and spectrographic analysis. But I didn't need to understand the science to understand the conclusion. The summary, written in cold, clinical language, laid it all bare. The poison was a custom-synthesized organometallic compound, a masterpiece of toxicological design. It contained traces of thallium, cleverly bonded within a complex molecule that acted as a transport agent, allowing it to cross the blood-brain barrier. It was designed to degrade slowly, releasing the heavy metal ions over a period of months, causing cumulative neurological damage, organ failure, and a host of symptoms that perfectly mimicked a rare, aggressive form of mitochondrial disease. The report stated, the compound is exceptionally sophisticated and would be virtually undetectable by standard hospital toxicology tests. Its design suggests a creator with an expert-level knowledge of both biochemistry and toxicology. It was Julian's signature, written in molecules instead of ink. The report on my blood sample was even more chilling. It confirmed the presence of the compound, though at levels that were, as the lab noted, surprisingly low given the anecdotal symptomology. They didn't know it was because I had been pouring my daily dose down the sink for the past 2 weeks, but it was there. The proof was now undeniable, a scientific certainty. I was being poisoned. I saved a report, encrypted it, and uploaded it to the same cloud storage as a video file. My arsenal was now complete. I had the witness, the video, the weapon, the poison itself, and the forensic evidence, the lab report. I could go to the police. I had a perfect, airtight case. I could see it all play out, the shock, the investigation, the trial, the headlines. Wellesley wife and chemist lover conspire to murder architect husband. They would be ruined. They would go to prison for the rest of their lives. And for a moment I considered it. It was the right thing to do, the civilized thing, the just thing. But as I sat there in the dark, the thought of it left me cold. Justice felt like an inadequate answer to the intimacy of their crime. They didn't just try to kill me, they tried to erase me. They did it in my home, in my bed with my coffee, turning every symbol of our life together into a weapon. They smiled at me, held my hand, and all the while, they were counting down the days until I was gone. a prison cell felt too clean, too distant. It wasn't symmetrical. It wasn't poetic. They wanted to watch me fade away, to witness my slow, painful demise. They took a perverse pleasure in their power over me. What kind of justice would it be if I didn't return the favor? The thought, once it took root, was terrifying in its clarity. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to use their own arrogance, their own cruelty, their own weapon against them. I wasn't going to send them to prison. I was going to send them to the grave they had so meticulously dug for me. The decision settled over me not with a thunderclap of rage, but with a quiet, chilling calm. The architect in me, the part that craved structure and balance, saw the elegant, terrible beauty of it. An eye for an eye, a life for a life, a slow, painful death for a slow, painful death. My chance came sooner than I expected. I was in the kitchen one evening, making myself a cup of herbal tea, a beverage I could trust, when Ava walked in. A glow on her face I hadn't seen in years. She was practically vibrating with a nervous, joyful energy. "Julian has the most wonderful news," she announced, unable to contain her smile. I looked up from my mug, my face a carefully constructed mask of weary curiosity. "Oh? He's been nominated for the Lathrop Prize in Chemistry," she said, her voice filled with pride. "It's a huge honor, a stepping stone to the Nobel," he says. "That's wonderful," I said, my voice a dry rustle. "To celebrate," she continued, her eyes shining, "we're going to have a small, private dinner. Just the two of us at Lead Oil. Lead Oil, the Star, a ridiculously exclusive restaurant in the city, famous for its private dining rooms and its months-long waiting list. A place for celebrating major victories. Or, in their case, a victory they believed was just around the corner." And then she said the words that sealed their fate. "It's next Saturday." Julian thinks of it as a sort of unofficial engagement party, a celebration of our future. She was looking at me, but her eyes were distant, already living in that future. A future without me. She was so lost in her own happiness that she didn't see the flicker in my eyes. She didn't see the gears of my mind lock into place. An engagement party, a celebration. An event that called for a special bottle of champagne. The final piece of the design fell into place, the setting, the weapon, the victims. Everything was aligned. They were going to toast to their future. And I was going to give them a drink to remember. The week leading up to their engagement party was the longest week of my life. It was a week of dual realities. In one, I was Liam Hayes, the dying architect. A man fading with tragic grace. I spent my days in bed, my conversation limited to weak whispers, my movements slow and pained. I was a living ghost, haunting the beautiful house I had built, a constant, morbid reminder to Ava of the prize she was about to claim. I saw the strain in her eyes, the impatience warring with her performance of wifely devotion. She was a runner in sight of the finish line, every second in agony. In my other reality, I was a phantom of vengeance, moving with silent, meticulous purpose. My nights were spent in my office, a command center, where I finalized the details of my masterpiece. The first step was the champagne. It couldn't be just any bottle, it had to be a statement. I went online and found what I was looking for, a vintage 1998 Dom Perignon. The year Ava and I had met. A cruel little private joke that only I would understand. I ordered it from a high-end wine purveyor, paying with a freshly created virtual credit card, and arranged for it to be delivered directly to Lead Oil on the afternoon of their dinner, addressed to Julian's reservation. The card was the next detail. I typed it myself, using a generic font. "From a secret admirer celebrating your bright future." The words were Julian's own, a twisted echo of the whispers I had overheard. It was a touch of poetic cruelty that I couldn't resist. The final, most critical step was preparing the poison. I had the small container of Julian's custom-made toxin hidden in my office. I had to transfer it into the champagne. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. I couldn't tamper with the bottle at the restaurant. I needed a way to introduce the poison without leaving a trace. My research led me to a simple, elegant solution, a microsyringe with a needle so fine it could pierce the cork in the foil seal, leaving a hole that was virtually invisible. I practiced on several old wine bottles I had in the cellar, perfecting the technique. I learned to slide the needle in at an angle, through the softest part of the cork, inject the liquid and withdraw it cleanly. The plan was this: I would intercept the delivery driver. It was a risk, but a calculated one. I tracked the package obsessively. On the Saturday of their dinner, the tracking updated to out for delivery. I knew the approximate route and delivery window. My window of opportunity would be small. I told Ava I was feeling particularly unwell, that I needed absolute quiet and would likely sleep through the afternoon and evening. It was the perfect excuse. As soon as she left for her pre-dinner hair appointment, my secret life began. I dressed in nondescript cloth as a gray hoodie, a baseball cap and sunglasses. I was no longer Liam Hayes, the well-known architect from Wellesley. I was just another anonymous man. I drove to a coffee shop a few blocks from the restaurant, My heart a steady, cold drum. I sat by the window, watching, waiting. The delivery van, a familiar navy blue, pulled up in front of Let Oil just after 3 p.m. The driver, a young man listening to music on his headphones, got out and went to the back of his truck. This was my moment. I walked calmly towards him, my hand in my pocket, clutching the syringe. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady. "Are you with Premier Wines?" He pulled an earbud out. "Yeah? I'm with the restaurant," I lied smoothly. "We're catering a special event tonight. The host wanted to make sure that bottle 98 Dom for the Julian Reed party is handled personally. He's very particular." The kid just wanted to finish his route. He grunted, pulling out the ornately wrapped bottle. "This it?" "That's the one," I said, taking it from him. "I'll sign for it. I've got the kitchens to prep." I scribbled an illegible signature on his electronic device. He shrugged, handed me the bottle, and went back to his truck, already lost in his music again. He wouldn't remember my face. I was just a minor inconvenience in his day. I walked away, my steps measured, not too fast. I turned the corner and got into my car, the champagne bottle resting on the passenger seat like a bomb. I drove to a deserted side street a few blocks away. My hands were rock steady. My mind was crystal clear. I carefully unwrapped the foil just enough to expose the top of the cork. I took out the syringe. The clear, viscous liquid inside glinting in the faint afternoon light. This was it. The culmination of months of pain, deception, and planning. This was the poison they had chosen for me. The weapon Julian had so brilliantly designed to erase a man from the world. I pushed the fine needle through the foil and into the cork. I felt the gentle resistance give way. I angled it downwards and slowly, deliberately depressed the plunger. I watched the poison slide from the syringe and into the bottle, where it would mingle with the celebratory bubbles. It was a tiny amount, but I knew from the lab report that it was more than enough. It was a lethal dose, concentrated and fast-acting when ingested directly, rather than meted out over months. I withdrew the needle, leaving a hole so small it was invisible to the naked eye. I carefully smoothed the foil back into place. The bottle looked perfect, untouched. A pristine vessel of death. Now for the final act of delivery. I drove back to the restaurant, this time parking around the back near the service entrance. I rewrapped the bottle in its fancy paper, attached the card I had written, and walked to the front. The Mactor D, a tall, imposing man in a sharp suit, stood at his station. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice polite. "I'm dropping this off for a party here tonight. The reservation is under Julian Reed." He took the bottle, his eyes briefly scanning the expensive label. "Of course, sir. We will make sure they receive it." "Thank you," I said. "It's a gift from an admirer." I turned and walked away without a second glance. It was done. The weapon was delivered. The trap was set. All the pieces were in place. I drove home, the anonymous gray hoodie discarded in the backseat. I changed back into my silk pajamas. I washed my face, messed up my hair, and got back into my sicked. When Ava came home an hour later, glowing and beautiful in her emerald dress, she found me exactly as she had left me. "How are you, my love?" she asked, her voice soft, but her eyes were sparkling with anticipation for her evening. I let out a weak cough. "Tired, just tired. You look beautiful, Ava." "Thank you," she said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. Her lips were cool. "Don't wait up." "I won't," I whispered. "Have a wonderful time. You deserve it." She smiled, a brilliant, genuine smile. "I will. Tonight is the beginning of everything." She turned and walked out of the room, her perfume lingering in the air like a ghost. I listened to her footsteps recede down the hall, the click of the front door, the sound of her car starting. The house fell silent. The beginning of everything. She had no idea how right she was. It was the beginning of the end. I lay in the dark, my body thrumming with a terrible, vibrant energy. The dying man was gone forever. I got up, went to my office, and turned on the monitor. I didn't need to be at the restaurant to see the final act. I had arranged for a different kind of view. A friend of a friend, a private investigator I'd hired for an exorbitant cash fee, was having a very expensive dinner at Let Oil tonight, sitting at a table with a perfect view of Julian's private room. A live video feed was streaming directly to my laptop. The curtain was about to rise. The video feed was grainy, shot discreetly from a phone on a neighboring table. But it was clear enough. It was a window into their triumph. The private dining room was opulent and intimate, bathed in the warm glow of a small chandelier. Ava and Julian sat across from each other, their faces illuminated by candlelight. They looked like a power couple from a magazine, a portrait of success and happiness. A fiction I was about to tear apart. I watched them talk, laugh. Julian was holding court, gesturing with his hands as he spoke. No doubt about his genius, his award, their brilliant future. Ava listened, her expression adoring. She would touch his hand, her smile so genuine it was sickening. They were living in a movie only they could see, and they were the heroes. I sat in my dark office, 1,000 miles away in my Wellesley home, yet I was more present in that room than either of them could imagine. I was a silent observer, the ghost at their feast. My house was quiet, the bed where I was supposed to be dying was empty. The only sounds were the soft hum of my computer and the steady, rhythmic beat of my own heart. It was the calm, patient heartbeat of a predator. Then, the sommelier entered their private room. My pulse quickened just a fraction. He was holding my gift, the 1998 Dom Perignon. He presented it with the flourish I had anticipated. I saw Julian's eyebrows raise in surprise, then his lips curl into a smug grin as he read the card. He passed it to Ava. She read it, and her hand went to her mouth in a gesture of delighted shock. A secret admirer. They thought the world was conspiring to celebrate them. They had no idea. The sommelier worked his magic with the cork. The soft pop was inaudible on my feed, but I imagined it, a starting pistol for the final lap. He poured the golden, bubbling liquid into their flutes. The champagne caught the light, sparkling with promise and with poison. They lifted their glasses, their eyes locked over their rims. This was their moment. The culmination of their lies, their betrayal, their patient, cruel work. They were toasting to my death, to the life they had stolen. To us, Julian mouthed a silent promise across the table. To us, Ava's expression echoed. They drank. I watched them both take a deep, satisfying swallow of the champagne. The first taste of their victory, the first taste of their end. I leaned closer to the screen, my entire being focused on their faces. I knew the poison's composition. I knew from the lab report that in such a concentrated dose, ingested on a relatively empty stomach, the effects would be swift and brutal, not instantaneous. That would be too kind. It was designed for a cascading failure, a beautiful, terrible symmetry. For a minute, nothing happened. They set their glasses down. Julian said something and Ava laughed. My heart felt like a stone. Did it fail? Did I miscalculate the dose? Did the alcohol neutralize it? A cold sweat prickled my neck. Then I saw it, a subtle shift in Julian's expression. He brought his glass up for another sip, but hesitated. He blinked, a slight furrow appearing between his brows. He put the glass down and touched his throat, a small, almost unconscious gesture. Ava noticed. What's wrong? Her expression asked. Nothing, he seemed to say, waving a dismissive hand. Just went down the wrong way. But his face was a little pale. He picked up his water glass and took a long drink. On the other side of the table, Ava's smile faltered. She licked her lips, her tongue darting out in a quick, nervous gesture. She looked down at her own glass, then back at Julian. A flicker of confusion, a dawning unease. The first wave was nausea, followed by a sharp, cramping pain in the abdomen. It was the poison attacking the lining of the stomach. I watched as Julian's face, moments before so smug and confident, began to contort. He pressed a hand to his stomach, his knuckles white. The color was draining from his face, replaced by a sickly, gray pallor. Julian, Ava's voice was a silent question on the screen. The joy had vanished from her face, replaced by a mask of fear. She pushed her chair back slightly. He tried to speak, but only a strangled gasp came out. He doubled over, a violent tremor shaking his entire body. His chair scraped backwards as he lurched to his feet, one hand braced on the table, the other clutching his midsection. His eyes were wide with a sudden, animal panic. The brilliant chemist, the man who understood every molecule in his body, was suddenly a stranger in his own skin, betrayed by a biological rebellion he couldn't comprehend. Ava was on her feet now, her face a canvas of horror. She stared at Julian. Then her gaze fell to the champagne bottle, then to her own half-empty glass. A terrible understanding began to dawn in her eyes. This wasn't a sudden illness. This wasn't food poisoning. This was something else. This was familiar. She looked across the room, her eyes darting wildly, as if searching for an enemy. But the enemy wasn't there. The enemy was at home, in his sick, dying. It couldn't be. Then her own body betrayed her. Her hand flew to her mouth. I saw her throat work convulsively. She stumbled backwards, away from the table, her beautiful emerald dress a stark contrast to her ashen face. The poison was indiscriminate. It didn't care about her beauty, or her plans, or the future she had so carefully curated. The second phase was neurological. The thallium, now coursing through their bloodstreams, was attacking their nervous systems. It started with a metallic taste, followed by confusion and a loss of motor control. Julian collapsed. He didn't fall gracefully. He crashed to the floor, taking the white tablecloth and a cascade of plates and silverware with him. The sound of shattering china must have alerted the staff. In the video, I saw the door to their room burst open. The Mactor D stood there, his professional composure shattered, his face a mask of shock. Ava didn't even seem to notice. She was staring at her own hands, which were trembling uncontrollably. She tried to take a step, but her legs buckled beneath her. She sank to her knees, her breath coming in ragged, painful sobs. She wasn't crying from grief. She was crying from terror and from a dawning, soul-crushing realization. Someone had done this to them, someone new. Someone had used their own perfect weapon against them. Her wild, terrified eyes seemed to stare directly into the camera, directly at me. In that moment, I knew she was thinking of me, not the weak, dying man in the bed, but the man she had married. The architect, the man who saw patterns, who understood structures. The man she had so fatally underestimated. The private investigator's fee cut out. He had seen enough. He didn't need to be a witness to the gruesome end. I closed the laptop. The house was silent again. The show was over. The structure they had built had collapsed. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured lawns of Wellesley, at the peaceful, orderly world they thought they owned. There was no triumph, no joy, just a vast, hollow silence where my rage used to be. I had balanced the equation. I had created a perfect, terrible symmetry. But the result was zero. Nothing. I felt nothing. I walked into our bedroom. I looked at the empty space on the bed beside me, the indentation on the pillow where her head used to lie. I had won. I had survived. I was free. But I was utterly, completely alone in the wreckage. The call came at 11:42 p.m. I was sitting in the dark, just waiting. I let it ring 4 times before I answered, making sure my voice was thick with sleep and irritation. Hello? Mr. Liam Hayes. The voice was professional, cautious, a detective. Yes, who is this? I asked, injecting a note of confusion into my tone. My name is Detective Miller with the Boston Police Department. I'm sorry to disturb you so late. Sir, are you the husband of Ava Hayes? Yes, I am. Is she all right? What's happened? My voice cracked with practiced anxiety. I was a widower now. I had to learn the part. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sir, there's been an incident at the restaurant Lead Oil. Your wife and a Mr. Julian Reed have been taken to Massachusetts General Hospital. I'm afraid it's very serious. The doctors asked us to contact the next of kin. You should come to the hospital. Hospital? What happened? Was it a car accident? I was peppering him with the questions of a bewildered husband. A sick man roused from his sleep to face a nightmare. We're not sure yet, sir. It appears to be some kind of acute poisoning. Poisoning? I let the word hang in the air, filled with disbelief and horror. My God. I don't understand. I'm not well myself. It's hard for me to travel. Is she going to be okay? Sir, the detective's voice softened with a touch of pity. You need to get down here. The drive to the hospital was surreal. I was a man playing a man who was falling apart. I made sure my driving was a little erratic, that my hands were visibly shaking when I handed the valet my keys inside. The emergency room was a chaotic world of controlled panic. I gave my name, and a nurse with tired eyes led me to a small, sterile family waiting room. Detective Miller found me there. He was a rumpled, middle-aged man who looked like he'd seen everything. He looked at me, at my pale face, my thin frame, the slight tremor I was still affecting in my hands, and his expression was one of pure pity. I was the tragic figure in the story, the sick husband, betrayed by his wife, now waiting to hear that she was dead. Mr. Hayes, he began gently, I'm so sorry, your wife, Ava, passed away a few minutes ago. Mr. Reed died upon arrival. The doctors did everything they could. I put my face in my hands and manufactured a dry, racking sob. It wasn't entirely fake. A part of me was mourning something, not Ava, not the woman who tried to murder me, but the idea of her, the memory of the woman I thought I had married. I was mourning the life I thought I had. We found a bottle of champagne at their table. Miller continued, his voice all business now. A gift, apparently. We've sent it for analysis, but the preliminary assessment from your doctors points to a highly aggressive, fast-acting toxin. It's a homicide investigation now. He paused. Mr. Hayes, I have to ask, did your wife have any enemies? Did Mr. Reed? I looked up, my eyes wide and full of feigned innocence. Enemies? No. Everyone loved Ava. And Julian was my best friend. The words tasted like ash, but I delivered them flawlessly. The investigation was swift and, for me, completely painless. I was a grieving, sickly husband. The police were gentle with me, their questions brief and considerate. The media, when they got wind of the story, painted a heartbreaking picture. A brilliant architect, already battling a mysterious, debilitating illness. Now a widower after his beloved wife and best friend were murdered in a bizarre and tragic poisoning. The theory the police settled on was the one I had subtly guided them towards, Julian, the brilliant chemist with hidden, massive debts. It wasn't hard for them to uncover his financial troubles. They found the motive. The prevailing theory was that one of Julian's failed biotech investments, a jilted partner or a ruined investor, had sought revenge. They saw it as a professional hit, a message sent using the chemist's own tools against him. Ava was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Collateral damage. No one ever suspected me. Why would they? I was a victim, twice over. The video file and the lab report remained my secret. Sleeping soundly in the encrypted depths of the cloud, they were a failsafe that was never needed. Weeks turned into months, the autumn chill gave way to the harsh New England winter. My recovery was deemed a medical miracle. With the stress of my wife's slow, secret betrayal, and my best friend's deception lifted, that was my doctor's unofficial theory. My body began to heal. The mysterious illness vanished as quickly as it had appeared. The color returned to my cheeks. I gained back the weight I had lost. I went back to work. The library I had designed was completed at the dedication ceremony. I stood at the podium and spoke about light, about structure, about creating spaces that endure. People looked at me with a mixture of awe and sympathy. I was a man who had survived hell and come back, stronger than before, a symbol of resilience. I sold the house in Wellesley. I couldn't live there anymore. It wasn't a sanctuary. It was a crime scene, a tomb filled with the ghosts of a life that was a lie. I moved into a sleek, minimalist apartment in the city, a place with no memories, a blank slate. Sometimes at night I stand at the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the constellation of city lights below. The world moves on. The police investigation into the murder of Ava and Julian is now a cold case. Filed away in a box somewhere. I am safe, I am successful, I am healthy. I won. But the victory is silent, it has no taste. I destroyed the people who tried to destroy me. I balanced the scales with a terrible, perfect precision. But the architect in me knows that when you demolish a structure, you are left with a void. I check my mail. There's a message from a private, encrypted address I don't recognize. I open it. It's from my PI, the man from the restaurant. It contains a single file, a final invoice. No. It's a sound file. Curious, I click play. There is a hiss of static, then a voice. It's Ava's voice, captured in the final moments, as the sirens wailed in the background. Her words are slurred, choked with pain and terror, but they are clear enough. It was Liam, she gasps, the coffee he knew. It was him. Then the recording ends. I stare at the screen, my heart a cold, still stone in my chest. He had recorded it. My PI had kept one last piece of insurance for himself, a final loose end, a string he could pull at any time. I look at the file name, it's just a string of numbers. I move my cursor over it, I can delete it. I can pretend I never heard it. I can continue my new life, my safe life. But the truth is, a structure is only as strong as its foundation. And the foundation of my new life is built on a bed of secrets and death. I close my eyes, I can see the scales of justice, the ones I worked so hard to balance. And I realize with a chilling certainty that they are still moving.